position. Regarding Fromm, I do not want to go into next year with Fromm as the backup quarterback. You bring up a good point, his ties to Buffalo. And maybe, you know what? It had me thinking, because I know it's like against the league rules and tampering, but I do believe in my heart that the New York Giants thought all along that Shane was going to be a high potential guy that they were going to bring in here at least mid-season last year. And maybe they did get some intel on Fromm, and maybe that's why they brought him in here to begin with. I don't think Fromm, I don't want him to be the backup. Could he remain on the roster in terms of a practice squad quarterback, much like he was with Buffalo? I could certainly see that, but I definitely think the Giants need an upgrade. Now, I could see them bringing in the other Buffalo guy, and I think that'd be a perfect fit with Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to me, given Daniel Jones's injury history, I think we would have to look into to bringing in a veteran. Jake Fromm, some promise showed last year, but I think they threw him in before he was ready because they were getting desperate with Mike Lennon not being able to do much. And I just think they were just getting desperate. And by the way, before I continue, folks, I realize I think the first part of our show got cut off a little bit. I see it's now functioning now. So I apologize if you were like looking for it. And I see it's now running live. So
was it? We were just talking to ourselves.
I think so. And I
guys, we were just talking to ourselves for 30 minutes, but it's okay.
It's okay. Listen. I think we recorded it, so if it didn't go live, I think it's been recorded anyway, so it'll show up on the replay. I hope so. Sorry about that, but yeah, I definitely think quarterback. Could I see them drafting one this year? Maybe. I don't know that I would draft one this year as a developmental project. Like I said, I would see if Jake Fromm could maybe develop into something. But yeah, a veteran for sure. And then just, do maybe a 1-year deal and kind of see what comes of it. And just hope that Daniel Jones develops. Because here's the thing. If Daniel Jones stutters again and doesn't develop, Giants are probably going to be drafting in the top half of the draft next year anyway. So
that's the same way I look at it too.
Right.
If Daniel Jones fails, it's not like we have a team like the Chicago Bears did when they went 11-5 with Trubisky at quarterback, where the defense was like number one in the league. We don't have that type of team where the defense could carry us to 10 or 11 wins. So if Jones doesn't at least become a near average starting quarterback in the NFL next year, Giants are going to be picking top 10 again. So and that's where you would go out and try to get your quarterback.
Yeah, definitely. All right, now I want to ask you about Saquon, because I just wrote an article over on Giants Country that Devonta Booker was named the unsung hero of 2021 by NFL.com. And I got to thinking, and I had this conversation with a couple colleagues during the pressers last week. Could Saquon be here next year? I mean, does it make sense to maybe look to trade him?
Is that what you're asking?
Pardon?
Are you asking if Booker could be here or Saquon?
No, Saquon. Do you
think Saquon's going to be here next year?
You think so?
Yeah.
Do you think he'll finish the season next year here?
That I don't know. I think that's circumstantial. I think it depends on what the trade market is, how well he's playing. Saquon could go either way for me in terms of being here more than a year or half a year, but I definitely think he's going to start the season as a New York Giant. The guy who I think will not is actually Booker.
Really?
Yeah, because they're going to save $2 million if they cut Booker. He costs $3 million to keep him. And the way I look at it, the guy has no ties to the new GM coming in. You could draft the running back in the 4th or 5th round and pay him, 25% to 20% of what you're currently paying Devontae Booker. And that's not a slight at Booker. I just think that the money could be utilized better in a different capacity.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Plus Booker, he's on the I think he's going to be 30. There's running backs in the draft that I think they can add. I still would like to see what Gary Brightwell can add to the mix, if not, besides special teams. But yeah, I think that's going to be a position they're going to have to add to. But see, here's my thinking, Chris. If Daniel Jones develops the way they want him to, and if Saquon has a good year, do you invest big contracts in both of them after 2022? I don't think he can.
No.
And you got to go with the quarterback, I would think. So at that point, what do? Do you franchise Saquon or do you maybe franchise Daniel? I mean, how do you? I know we're dealing down the line here, but how would you see that playing out, assuming both have solid years?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Here's what I'll say. I think the probability of keeping Saquon longer than just this year or potentially a year after that, like you alluded to with the franchise tag, only goes up if Daniel Jones fails. Because at that point, like if Saquon proves he can stay completely healthy for a full season, he gets back to his old form. Is it possible the Giants could sign him on, say, a 3-year extension? Sure. But the only way I could see it making sense is if they say to themselves, well, we're going to be bringing in a rookie quarterback. We're not going to have to pay the quarterback that much money. And a guy like Saquon Barkley could help further the young quarterback's development. That's the only way I could see it even being plausible, is if Daniel Jones actually fails. If Daniel Jones succeeds and Daniel Jones grows as a quarterback next year, I don't see a path to where Saquon Barkley could be in the long-term plans of the Giants.
Yeah, absolutely. And, here's the other thing. I mean, for as talented as Saquon is, I think initially when they took him, the plan might have been to build around him. I mean, I could be wrong here. And I don't know that you can build around a running back. I think you have to build around a quarterback. And I think that's what the Giants are looking to do here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what the best teams do. I mean, you tell me one team off the top of your head that in today's NFL, and you could find one here and there. There's outliers like Marshawn Lynch, for example. When the Seahawks won a Super Bowl, Russell Wilson was still wet behind the ears. He wasn't developed yet. He was probably the focal point of that offense. You could say Derrick Henry with the Titans, but it's few and far between where the running back is the most important part of a team's offense, and they're a winning football team. It's very rare.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I put this quote up here from JC Silva about tight end, and I'm going to throw a scenario out at everybody. And I know what kind of reaction I'm going to get here, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, because I was talking with somebody. If the old coaching staff was back, I think we could all agree, Evan Engram, no way he's coming back. Mm-hmm. Brand new coaching staff coming in now. Everybody's getting a clean slate. Is there a tiny possibility, in your opinion, that maybe Evan Engram gets a 1-year prove-it deal from this team, given that he's got the talent? I mean, for some reason, past coaching staffs haven't been able to bring it out from him. And I know he's not a very popular player. People would just assume get rid of him yesterday. But do you think there's maybe a tiny, tiny chance that he gets that 1-year prove-it deal, given that, he is athletic, and if they use him right, maybe he can contribute to the offense?
My answer is no, but it's not because I don't think the New York Giants wouldn't bring him back if he was willing to take a 1-year cheap salary. So I think they would, because like you said, he does have potential, and maybe with an improved coaching staff, you get the most out of him. But what I see is a guy that teams are going to look at, and they're going to say, this was a guy that was misused. This was a guy that was not given the best circumstances to succeed. And they're going to say he was a first-round talent. He's got immense upside. If we put him in our situation, he's going to flourish. And I think there'll be a number of teams that are willing to throw some money at him to go out there and give him a multi-year deal. So that's my answer on Engram. I don't see him coming back here because, as much as Giants fans may not believe it, I do think there's going to be a handful of teams that are actually going to be interested in bringing him into their football team. You think about a team like, I don't know, say Rodgers stays with the Packers, a team like the Green Bay Packers, they could certainly use a weapon like that in their offense. And I think there's a number of other teams, which is good news for the Giants, by the way, because we'll get compensated.
Well, not for the next year, though.
Yeah,
until the next year. Yeah, definitely. But, I just found that interesting because when I was talking to somebody about that, I said, I never thought of that, but yeah, that's usually what happens with new coaching staffs. They come in, they give everybody a clean slate. But you know what? The Giants haven't been able to get much out of Engram. It's a shame. The kid works his tail off, but it just hasn't played out. And, I know for Inside Football, which is another of the publications I write for, we always say that he's an athlete. He's not really a what we would consider a football player. There's a difference between being athletic and being a football player. And just too much has just shown up in his game that make us say, geez, this guy is just not a football player. But, the effort's there. It's hard to argue with the effort. And like I said, I think Evan is a good guy. Yeah. He comes in, he works his tail off, but just sometimes, it just doesn't pan out for whatever.
I'll also be honest with you. If I was Evan, I wouldn't want to come back to the Giants, if I'm being honest with you, because I would feel like I want a fresh start. The fan base can't stand him. I remember it was like clearly apparent that he felt like he was bothered. He didn't do anything bad. He handled it professionally, but you could see it in his face. He was bothered by some of the heckling by the fans. I remember seeing that a couple of times on TV this past year. So if I was Engram, I'd want to go to a more developed offense and an opportunity to flourish. And I do think somebody's gonna. I'm not saying he's gonna get a record-breaking contract, but I do think somebody's gonna sign him and give
Sure.
him a decent amount of money.
And the tight end class this year is pretty deep. So it's not like, if they lose them, they're going to be left, high and dry. So, all right. I got this next comment here from Daniel Kim, who says, we need a new training staff and medical team because the Giants are always hurt and soft as glass. Now, all right. I know I'm going to sound like an apologist here, and that's not my intention, but let me just clarify something. The medical team treats the injuries. They do not cause the injuries. The unit that I would look at, and this comes from the head coach,
Mhm.
the strength and conditioning staff. That's been the problem in my mind. When Aaron Wellman was here, I don't think the Giants had half the injury issues that they had the last few years. So, I mean, I think, we talk about the importance of the coordinator hires and some of the assistant coaching hires. The training, the strength and conditioning staff, that's important as well. And I know I've mentioned this on the show before, and I think I am going to have a medical specialist come on, and I'm hoping to get a football coach, not a football coach, ex-football coach who is in strength and conditioning to come on to talk about some of these injury issues. But Chris, I mean, last year the Giants were like, I think the second most injured team, or maybe they were the first
I
most
think they were
injured team.
first. I think they were
Yeah.
first.
So, I mean, what's your take on this? Do you think, this was just Joe Judge running too hard of a practice? Do you think it was just the training? I have theories. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have my degree yet, but I question some of the training that might have been going on behind the scenes, and I don't know the full aspect of it. I also question this incessive need of people wanting to lose body fat, which I think you need a certain degree of body fat, maybe a little bit more than you think you need, because it acts as a buffer and a cushion and maybe a lubricant, I guess, at some point on some of your joints and ligaments. But again, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm just, spitballing here.
Yeah, and that's all I could do. I get asked this question all the time because it's not just this year. It's been, this has been a recurring theme for a long time with the Giants. It always seems like they have a ton of injuries. The year before, it didn't seem like they had that many. It's just that they had a big injury to Saquon Barkley, but it didn't seem like the team was nearly as banged up as this past year. But I think it's a multiple things. I think it's like you said, strength and conditioning coach. I'm sure has something to do with it. Obviously, some people point to the turf. Some people point to Joe Judge's practice methods. I think some of it may have to do with the fact that we seem to sign guys that may have an injury history. You look at Kenny Galladay, we signed him. Even Adoree Jackson had a bit of an injury history as well before we brought him in here. Kyle Rudolph, it was well documented that he had an injury that the New York Giants were able to look past. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I don't just think it's one singular thing, much like the New York Giants themselves. Like people always say, what's the problem with the Giants? I don't think there's one problem. I think there's like 20 problems, and it's just a matter of figuring out which problem needs to be fixed first.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully they get that straightened out because nobody can seem to find the answer to it. And I know it's frustrating. I know I have people on my Twitter account ask me about it all the time. Fans ask me about. I see a lot of comments here on the chat this morning. And trust me, it is frustrating. I mean, even for the players, it's frustrating, especially, they work out during the offseason. And by the way, I think that might have something to do with it as well, because I question whether or not the trainers they're using are just generic trainers or are they football specific trainers. I think there's a difference in that. That and I pointed to myofascial stretching, which is something I had discovered a few years ago, which by the way I love. It's a little different than regular stretching. So it's an interesting topic, and it is one I'm going to address on the show coming up. I think next week I have the doctor coming on, and then I'm going to see if I can get the football trainer on as well. But yeah, for those of you who are asking about it, stick around. We'll definitely have that topic.
It's a great topic.
On there. Yeah. Especially, and I want to give a shout out. I apologize who it was, but I think it was somebody named Steve, maybe I think it was, sent me an email saying that the Bills eliminated squats from their warm-ups, and thus they didn't have a lot of injury issues or something like that. So I don't know. I mean, the body is so fascinating. I don't think there's one set formula for that, but anyway, folks, we got to take a commercial break. Apologize, I do have to get my sponsors in, but we're going to go to about 12:30. So we've got another hour with the entertainer. I'm psyched about it. Hope you are as well. Hope you'll stick around. So let me get these commercials in, and we will be right back at you. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up with the entertainer. But first, if you do a lot of driving, you need to know about the Get Upside app that offers savings every time you fill up at the pump. Download the free Get Upside app today and use the promo code Touchdown when you sign up to get at least 25 cents per gallon or more back on your first fill up at participating gas stations. You can cash out anytime you want to your bank account, PayPal, or get an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. So go ahead, download that free Get Upside app today to start your savings. And don't forget to use that promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. All right, Giant fans, we have so much more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, the NFL might be winding down, but there's still so much more to go in terms of the sports world. And betonline.net has all the odds, all the information you need to make your bets wisely. BetOnline is the number one spot for all things NFL, for basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, and your favorite Vegas games. Check them out today. They've got odds, they've got player performance props. They have even they'll even tell you when the next head coach is going to be fired of a team and where that person might land. So plenty of stuff you can choose from their extensive selection of offerings. BetOnline.net is your number one online wagering destination and is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we are back with DaEntertainah. I am Patricia Traina, and appreciate y'all tuning in. We see we have a nice, healthy following here. So a shout out to everybody who took the time. And again, my apologies for the earlier gaffe. You didn't miss that whole much. We just touched a little bit on the Brian Flores situation. Unfortunate, but Chris and I are both hopeful that at the end of the day, that that changes are made to the Rooney Rule that bring about more diversity in the workplace, because it's clear that if you look at the numbers and the stats, there's just not enough. And hopefully that changes, because everybody deserves a chance, regardless of your sex or your gender or your race or whatever the case may be. So anyway, appreciate y'all tuning in. Let's get to some more of your questions. Let's see. JC Silver, let me put this one up on the screen. Is Nick Gates, Shane Lemieux coming back? JC, they're under contract, so I guess you mean from the injuries. Lemieux, I expect back. Gates, I think, will be back. I just don't know if Gates will be back to start the season. My guess is Gates could end up on PUP, because his injury, from what I remember, from what details I do have, which, granted are not, it's not intimate details, but kind of reminds me of Rich Seibert's injury from several years ago. And it took a couple of years for Richie to come back. So listen, I learned back then never to count a guy out. Richie, I thought Richie's career was done. He proved me wrong, which I was glad to see, because I absolutely love him. I feel the same way about Nick. I don't think Nick is done. Now, Chris, let me ask you this. If Nick does come back, and I do think he will, do you put him at center, or do you maybe look to draft a center and move Nick to guard?
Yeah, good question. As far as the first part goes, I definitely think Lemieux will be back. Gates, to me, is still iffy, at least for this year, like for the reasons that you said. The guy's had 7 leg surgeries. But if Nick Gates can play, I mean, I think it depends on the draft. Here's what I'll say. I don't think Nick Gates is going to prevent you from drafting a center. If you feel there's a top-tier center in this draft that falls into your lap, say, in the second round, I don't think that's going to prevent you from doing that. That's kind of the beauty of Nick Gates. The guy, you can move him all over, right? So if you think there's a guy that could be a long-term piece at the center position and you like him, I think you still go out and draft him and you shift Gates to the guard spot. If you don't draft the center And Gates can play, keep him where he is. Obviously, that you want to continue to further develop that chemistry between Jones and Gates at the center spot. So depends on what they do in the draft, but I'm leaning that Gates probably will not be a part of the opening day starting lineup on the offensive line this year.
Okay, so now that raises the question: do you draft a center, or do you bring back Billy Price and just have him as your placeholder?
No. I'm
No.
good with Billy Price. I that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a big Billy Price fan. Billy Price was really bad. I would prefer the New York Giants do take a center at some point in this draft. A lot of people talk about Linderbaum. If it's not him, I have a preference of them taking a center, hopefully relatively early. I do think they need a lot of help on that interior part of the offensive line. But no, I don't want to see Billy Price back here next year.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I'm with you on that. Now, speaking of the offensive line, Chris, what's your thought about Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach they hired from Buffalo? Do you like the hire, and if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know a ton about him, but the thing that I like about it more so than anything else is when you look at the New York Giants over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and something that Joe Shane talked about in his opening press conference, there's been no continuity specifically on the offensive line, both with the players and the coach, right? I mean, you think about it. I mean, with under Joe Judge alone, they went through 3 different offensive line coaches, and they had like 3 other guys that were mentoring Rob Sell last year, Pat Flaherty being one of them. There has not been like a singular voice to teach these players. And if you factor in Joe Judge, it was kind of 3 offensive line coaches Joe Judge's first year. Because if you remember, he was kind of the guy that took over for Mark Colombo and made some alterations. So the one thing that I really like about bringing in Bobby Johnson is I think it kind of solidifies that there's going to be at least a couple of years of continuity on the offensive line in terms of their coach due to the fact that he's coming over from Buffalo. It's clearly a guy that they like. It's a guy they enjoy working with. So I don't see Brian Daboll firing him after a year. So more so than anything else, that's what I like. And when you look at what he was able to accomplish this year, when I did a little research on Buffalo's offensive line this past year, they had no continuity on the line. They had a ton of injuries. They had a lot of guys that had to sit out due to COVID, yet they were still one of the better pass blocking units in football. They only surrendered the second most sacks in all of football, despite the fact that Josh Allen had the 5th most passing attempts. So I think I think it's a good get by the Giants.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, he basically rebuilt that line. I think it was in 2019. They had 4 new starters, which, hey, does that sound familiar to anybody? So,
Yeah.
I mean, now, and you raise a good point. You talk about continuity. We talk about how the Giants haven't had continuity at offensive coordinator. They haven't had it also on offensive line. So I wonder how much of that played into the fact that this Giants offensive line the last couple of years just wasn't very good. I mean, you had Colombo was a very different, had different teaching methods, different preferences. Then Googs had different teaching methods. And then you bring in Rob Sale, who not a horrible coach, but he was a college coach. And I don't know if he ever really adapted to the pro level. I mean, no continuity there. It's just like the offensive coordinator position, I think.
Yeah. And that's what I like about it more so than anything else, is I think you're definitely going to have continuity at that spot. Now, the Kafka one, who knows? You may not have a ton of continuity there, but the good, because the Giants offense is good. We've seen it in the NFL. Teams are looking for the next hotshot, offensive coordinator, and he's definitely a guy that people were really looking at and were attracted to. So if the Giants offense takes a big jump, maybe we lose him. But the good news is we got Daboll. So Daboll's obviously a guy that I think is going to have a lot of say in this offense to begin with. I think that's the main reason why we brought him in. So that's the good news there, and why I wanted them to hire an offensive coach to begin with.
Yes, definitely. Now, before we talk about the defensive side of the ball, just want to quick let everybody know who's watching live. I have a box here. Now, for those of you who haven't been following the Locked On Giants podcast, when I hit 1,000 subscribers, they sent me a lollipop, an actual big one of those novel lollipops with all the multiple colors. So they said, okay. I said to them, thanks for that. I said, what do I get when I hit 2,000? Well, this is what I get when I hit 2,000. What's in this box? I don't know. But what I'm going to do is, and I know I'm close to 2,000 subscribers. So those of you who are watching, please hit that subscribe and like button. And I will actually open this box on the air once I see that I have hit 2,000 subscribers. I have a feeling I know what it is. I just don't know the specific details, but it should be fun. And we will find out together what is in the box if I hit 2,000 subscribers. So thanks to everybody who's popping in. All right, Chris, let's talk defense. It looks like Patrick Graham is coming back.
Yep.
Disappointed that he didn't get the head coaching job. I mean, really a solid, smart candidate. But the Vikings decided to go in a different direction. I don't think Graham has been mentioned with any other coaching opening that remains. I think there was a couple left, if I'm not mistaken, the Saints and the Texans. On the flip side, I'm kind of glad that Patrick's coming back. What are your thoughts about his return?
Yeah, I don't know how legitimate it was. It was somebody with a check mark. I think I read earlier this morning that the Raiders are looking at Graham as well, potentially. But I do think he's going to be back. From everything we've heard, it looks like he's going to be back as the DC. The good news that would have came out from it if he got the Vikings job was we would have gotten 2 third-round comp picks, which would have been nice. It would have been nice to add that. And there is a lot of good defensive coordinators out there. Vic Fangio, Don Martindale. There's options that the Giants could have brought in. But as far as Patrick Graham goes, I see him catch a lot of slack from the fan base in terms of the fact that they talk about how, his bend but don't break approach. Listen, I think Patrick Graham's a pretty damn good defensive coordinator. I think he's worked with what he's been provided with. And when you factor in, he's got no real number one edge rusher. It's very hard for them to get pressure unless they blitz. And we saw when they tried to blitz the first couple of weeks, what it did. We got torn apart defensively. So I think the New York Giants need to add a top-tier edge rusher to really allow Patrick Graham to be as aggressive as some fans may want him to be. We're weak in that area, but I thought Patrick Graham, especially after the first 3 or 4 weeks, did a pretty good job on a week-to-week basis in terms of game planning. You think back to that Chiefs game, he did a damn good job against that Chiefs offense. He took Travis Kelce completely out of the game, and they did a great job on Tyreek Hill as well in that contest. So, yeah, I know he's got a bend but don't break approach, and fans may not like that, but he's not getting any help on the other side of the ball. And he doesn't have the horses to be an offense, say like the 49ers or one of these defenses that you are seeing are getting consistent pressure on the quarterback play to play. So I think there needs to be an improvement on that side of the ball in terms of personnel. But I think Graham's a pretty smart guy, and I'm glad he's back. I think he's a good coach.
Now, here's the caveat here. As everybody might know, and if you don't know, I have this on Giants Country. I recently did a cap breakdown. I looked at the Giants salary cap and I came up with a plan to trim about 40 plus million off the salary cap.
Which is what Shane said he's going to do, 40 million.
Yes. Well, right. And this was before that story came out. I figured about 40 million. But anyway, when I look at the Giants cap, the top 5 is where they are most top heavy. And I think the top 5, and I don't remember the exact order, but I know Leonard Williams, James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, Blake Martinez, and Kenny Golladay are the top 5 heaviest cap hits. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of defensive players in there. So that said, I don't think Leonard Williams is going anywhere. I don't think Adoree Jackson's going anywhere. Could the Giants conceivably get by if they were to part ways with Martinez and Bradbury? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually did a video on this too the other day and talked about the guys they could potentially cut. If I just pulled it up now so I could talk about it as I'm talking to you. There's some guys on the bottom that I could see them being cut as well. Dixon to me is an obvious cut along with Rudolph. Those 2 guys save about $8 million by themselves, and that now you got to save another $32 million. There's also guys like Slayton that you could potentially trade that would save you $2.5 million. Caden Smith could save you $2.5. He carries no dead cap hit. O'Shane Zimenez could save you $1 million. Julian Love could save you 2.6. And I know as fans we really like these guys, but at the end of the day, you have to realize that the guys that are coming in have no attachments to these players. But in order for them to save $40 million, like Shane has said, I think you have to cut at least one of those 2 guys. I can't see both Martinez and Bradbury coming back. I'd be shocked. Those 2 guys by themselves would save you $21 million if you were to cut both. The other thing that Joe Shane said, and why I don't think they're going to look to restructure these salaries, he said he's not looking to kick money down the road. He's not looking to kick the can down the road. So I don't expect extensions. Again, he has no ties to any of these players. So I wouldn't be surprised if they cut both. I certainly think they're cutting at least one.
I have Bradbury as the likely cut. And I know people are saying, what are you, crazy? He's the number 1 cornerback. I don't think Bradbury, he dropped off last year. I mean, he's still a very good cornerback. But again, you look at the draft and you say, okay, can they make up for it in the draft? And it's a deep draft at cornerback. Martinez is interesting because of the injury. I have him as a restructure, and I think they can do a restructure where they're not kicking a lot of money down the road. I think they're going to have to be honest with you. And, another guy that they're going to have to cut, he's not in the top 5, but he's in the top 10, is Shep.
Yeah.
And that's going to break my heart. It really is. But, I just don't see how he's back with Kadarius Toney on the roster. So, I mean, it, it it's tough. But let's stick with the defense here for a second. If they do cut Bradbury, how big of a hole does that create for this defense? And do they have maybe some of these younger guys who can, where Graham can maybe finagle it a little bit? Maybe, I don't know, maybe they put a Dory Jackson on the number one corner receiver rather and plug in another guy, or do they need to add now at this position?
Yeah, I mean, I think Adoree instantly becomes your number one corner, at least for next year, if you were to cut Bradbury. But it opens up the possibility, like I see Floyd Samuel saying in the chat, cut James and maybe draft Stingley, the highest rated cornerback in this year's draft. If they were to cut Bradbury, it definitely opens up the possibility that you could take an early corner for sure. It's definitely an important position. And you look at what the Bills have done in the past, they built their defense mainly around a strong secondary. They kind of added those edge rushers at the tail end of it in more recent drafts, but they had one of the better secondaries in football for a number of years. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the New York Giants take a corner with one of those first two picks in this year's draft, especially if they cut James Bradbury. I definitely think it's a possibility.
So you're thinking one of the first two
I'm not
picks?
saying it. I don't know if I would mock that, but if they
Yeah.
did it, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, well, nothing would surprise me. This right now, we don't have a feel for how Shane might be thinking. After a while, you kind of develop a feel for how your general manager and your head coach start to think when it comes to personnel. And right now, we've got to figure all that out, obviously, and going to be interesting. I have an article that I'm doing. I hope to have it done today. I probably won't have it done till the weekend though, because it does require a little research. But I did a study of how Buffalo has drafted versus how the Giants have drafted. And it's a comparative study. So I'm just doing a little bit more research to finalize it. It will be on Giants Country at some point this weekend. Because so if you're not planning to watch the Pro Bowl, and who is? I'm not.
We got the Senior Bowl tomorrow. I'll watch that.
The Senior Bowl that I want to tune in for, definitely. But the Pro Bowl, no thanks. I mean, so at some point I will have that article out. If you want to check it out, that'll be on Giants Country. So, all right, a couple more questions here. Let's get those in. Lake Nona, do you think Daniel Jones's 50-year option will be picked up before May, or if he has a really good year next year, do they pay him the big money? I don't think his 50-year option gets picked up. Would you agree, Chris?
I'm leaning that it won't. I guess I wouldn't be shocked if it did, but I don't think it should be. I've talked about the reasoning as to why. And even if they did pick it up, I don't really see the benefit, because if he has a great year, which we're all at least we all should be hoping as Giants fans that's the case. He's going to want to rip that up anyway. He's going to want an extension. He's not going to want to play on a 1-year deal. So the way I look at it is, especially with the injury concerns and the lack of production so far at the quarterback position, I don't see the value in extending him on the 5th-year option. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Financially, I don't think it makes sense. And look, if he plays well and you don't reach a new contract extension, you franchise him. And then obviously that means you make a decision on Saquon, and Saquon now, if you don't get him signed, you let him walk. But again, where's your priority? Who's going to be the cornerstone of your offense? And if Daniel has a great year, he's going to have to be the cornerstone. I can't see them choosing Saquon over Daniel as the cornerstone. And I love Saquon. I hope he's a Giant for life, but I don't know that you can do that. Because remember, the other thing you have to take into consideration is Andrew Thomas's contract. I think he's going into year 3 this year. He's going to be eligible for an extension. So you got some big things that are coming up. And I haven't even talked about Dexter Lawrence, who a lot of people forget that his contract, his 5th-year option, is also on the table because he was a first rounder in that 2019 draft class. I don't think they pick his deal up either.
No, I don't think they're going to. I mean, who knows? I guess we're going to see how they evaluate these players, but I agree with you. I don't think they're picking up Dexter Lawrence's option. I don't know what the price would be, but I don't see him being in the long-term plans of this football team. I'd be surprised. I think they're going to look at that as a guy that they could get that level of production in the draft in the 2nd or 3rd round. It's not like he's been killing it at that position. So I expect them to clean house with a lot of these guys that get them as drafted in the past, because it's cheaper, it's more cost effective, and you get younger, and it's more long-term thinking.
All right. Now, I see some of you are asking me about specific college players. And the reason why I haven't flashed those questions is because I haven't studied them yet. I am going through all the players. I see, for example, Satvik. asked me about Bailey Zappi out of Northern Kentucky. Haven't gotten that far yet. I'm going through them. On Giants Country, we have scouting profiles, and I've got articles that just came in actually that I have to edit after I'm done with this show from the Senior Bowl and from stuff related to the draft. So guys, I promise you, as we get a little deeper into it, I will be able to comment more on some of these draft picks. I don't know, Chris, are you familiar with this guy? Let me just put the question on the screen here.
I'm somewhat familiar with him. I've watched a couple of highlight clips on YouTube about him. I know he threw like 53 touchdowns this year. He goes to a small school. I'm somewhat familiar with him. But I can't speak that, I don't know enough about him where I can speak like a lot about him. But I know like most people have him mocked in like the 3 to 5 round area. He's definitely not going to be a first round pick.
Yeah. Now here's speaking of, just going back to cuts for a second here. Yuri writes, Logan Ryan is a primary cut candidate. I don't think so this year either. I did not have him in my salary cap health plan, if you will. I think next year makes more sense, but
yeah, I mean, looking at it, Pat, I mean, he has a cap hit rather of $12.2 million next year. If you cut him, you still have to pay him 11.5.
Yeah.
So you're saving $700,000 if you cut him. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The following year, however, and that's where it gets more interesting with some of these guys they could cut. You would save, he would cost 12.2 to keep, 2.9 to cut. So you'd be saving like, $7-8 million. Other guys they could cut are Leonard Williams. He's $8 million to cut. He's 26 to keep. So it's $18 million in savings if he's not progressing and they don't feel he's part of the long-term solution. Galladay, 10 to cut, 21.4 to keep. So that saves you $11.5 million if you were to move on from him. Adoree Jackson, you could save 12 if you were to cut him. So there's a lot of options the following year with some of these higher priced players on the team. This year, it just doesn't add up. The cut doesn't, the savings doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, Chris, I want to ask you about the draft. Giants have 5th and the 7th pick. Do you keep those picks or do you maybe try to move down a little bit, maybe entice one of these quarterback needy teams to come up and take one of those picks? And if so, which pick are you thinking about moving from? And I know it's early. We still have to do the combine. We still got to do pro days.
Yeah.
So, what's your feeling right now? And I'm not going to hold you to it, obviously, but what's your feeling right now on that?
I see everybody getting so excited over Malik Willis and all these quarterbacks, and maybe we will take a quarterback. Who knows? I'm excited because I want the quarterbacks to look great because, like you said, it's going to potentially up the trade value if the New York Giants look to trade down because I honestly believe we are going with Jones, and I don't think we're taking a first-round quarterback. So if Malik Willis looks fantastic, great. That means we may be able to get a ton for a team that's looking to trade up to receive a quarterback in this year's draft if that's not our option. So I think only good news comes out of the Senior Bowl if these quarterbacks look really good this weekend, whether or not we're taking a quarterback or not. As far as what pick I'd look to trade, whichever pick's going to get me more. But I would guess the 5th pick makes more sense due to the fact, more than likely, if a team's trading that early in the first round looking to trade up, it's going to be for a quarterback. And if you trade up to 5, you're jumping the Panthers. The Panthers are a team that potentially could look to take a quarterback. Sam Darnold's not the be-all, end-all there, even though I know they traded for him last year. So if I'm a team like, I don't know, the Vikings or, the Broncos or a team that may be looking to draft a quarterback, I'm looking to potentially jump Carolina. So I think the 5 pick probably makes a little bit more sense for a team that's looking to trade up. And if I'm trading back, I better be getting a future first-round pick.
What about in terms of stacking up picks for next year? I mean, do you worry about next year and say, look, this team is not – I don't think this Giants team is one draft away from fixing all its problems. I think a solid draft will certainly help. Don't get me wrong. But I think, offensive line is a big issue. I think you need to find that Batman on the edge rusher spot. If you cut Bradbury, you might need to add another cornerback. Tight end, we mentioned, is a need. Probably getting another receiver could be another need if they part with Shep. I mean, so do you say to yourself, okay, we're going to swing for the fences this year, or we're going to maybe sacrifice, maybe trade down, and maybe look to get some picks for next year, 2023, so that we can continue to stack up? Because again, remember, you look at the unrestricted free agent list. Other than maybe Evan Engram and I don't know, maybe Will Hernandez. And I'm just guessing here.
Lorenzo Carter.
Lorenzo Carter. Okay, Lorenzo Carter. Those three. Is anybody going to really bring a major comp pick if they sign someplace else?
No, not. I'm trying. I think there's one other. Oh, Jabril Peppers, maybe.
Peppers, yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, no. I think the highest we're going to get is probably a 4th round comp pick. But if I'm the GM in this year's draft, I mean, yes, I'm looking to trade down. I'm not just thinking about next year. This team is not about next year. This is the beginning. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, this is the beginning of another rebuild. So the more future draft capital you could get, the better. So if I'm the Giants and the right deal presents itself, especially if I'm not taking a quarterback in this year's draft, I want as much capital as I can for the future in case I have to take one. I think it's insurance in case Daniel Jones doesn't take a big leap if you trade down and get another 1st round pick in the 2023 draft class. So I think that's ideal. Like if you would ask me right now, what's like an ideal, day one scenario for the New York Giants, it would be trading down from, let me pull up the tankathon right now. I'll give you my ideal. We trade down from 5 to, we'll say 12 with Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota doesn't feel like Cousins is the long-term answer there at the quarterback spot, and they love a guy like Malik Willis or Pickett or whoever. We trade down from 5 to 12. We get a future 1st, maybe a future 3rd along with it. We take a tackle with that 7th pick, and then we just take the best available player at 12, whether that be an interior offensive lineman, whether that be an edge rusher, a linebacker, whatever. That to me is an ideal scenario. You fill 2 immediate needs, and you get a future 1st round pick. I think that'd be a great day one for the New York Giants if they could do that.
I like that. I think we should name you assistant general manager and put you in Joe Shane's ear. All right, folks, I've got one more commercial break I have to run, but don't worry. We still have at least another half hour to go with the DaEntertainah. We're having a ball here. I hope you're enjoying the show as well. Let me run this quick commercial. We'll be right back at you. All right, Giant fans, still more to come on today's show. But first, if you are aiming to eat healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and sugar. Most Built Bars have around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And they are covered in pure milk chocolate, which means they taste great. And as I said, you don't feel like you're eating healthy. You feel like you're eating a candy bar. So no matter what diet plan you are on, Built Bar is sure to be a great fit for your dietary needs. Head on over to BuiltBar.com today and use our special promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off your first order. Again, that's code LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order at BuiltBar.com. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. No more commercials the rest of the way. It's just me and the DaEntertainah and the DaEntertainah. I love that. I love how
people
that
have been saying that in the comments a lot. DaEntertainah. I like it's a good. It does sound good.
I do like it. I do like it. And listen, I don't know about you, but I'm having a ball talking football with you as always. I mean, you're so knowledgeable, and I really do appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all your followers who are checking out the podcast. And I hope y'all will become subscribers here of the Locked On Giants podcast, because I try and do as good a job as Chris.
No, you can. Let me shout out a couple of my followers, by the way. I see a bunch of my regulars are in here. So Roldy, JC Silva, Dustin, Floyd, Fabian, my dad's in the chat, Ron Juan, Sergio. Thank you to all you guys for coming over and checking out the pod. I always appreciate all you guys. And
I appreciate y'all taking the time as well. So hey, listen, let's get back to some Giant stuff. Chris, one coaching move that the Giants made, and I don't think it's gotten a lot of write up. I know I wrote about it, is they're bringing back Jerome Henderson, it looks like, as the defensive backs coach. I am thrilled with that. I thought Henderson did a really good job, all things considering, with the defensive backs, given the situation that he faced, with the injuries to Peppers, with Adoree Jackson in and out of the lineup, with the COVID situation. We remember at the end of the year there, I thought he did a great job. And, one of the things I liked about Henderson and when they hired him initially, and I'm a big believer in this, and I know you can't always have this, but he was a former NFL defensive back. And for me, there's just something to be said about coaches who were former players, because I just think that they bring something extra to the profession, and they can, help their students or their pupils even further. So what are your thoughts about the Giants retaining him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. Because there's familiarity now on the defense. If you keep some of these guys, as long as they feel like these guys are good fit. Dable obviously interviewed him. I saw a picture. I think it was Bobby actually from Talking Giants who posted it, where Dable went out to dinner with Henderson, and I said to myself, all right, he's probably coming back.
Yeah.
But yeah, the New York Giants look like they're kind of trying to keep the coaching staff on the defensive side for the most part as intact as I guess they possibly can. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the defense has been the problem the last couple of years. So I see no problem keeping a guy like Henderson on the staff along with Patrick Graham. So I'm happy that they're back. I see no issues with it at all.
Yeah, I am as well. I mean, like I said, something to be said about former NFL players who come on and not all of them, but they just I've asked enough players about it over the years, and they say, yeah, there's definitely something there because they've been in the trenches. They see what's going on, and they can lend a different perspective. So, all right, we got a question here from Satvik. I hope I'm saying the name. I'm bad with names, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. Do you feel the Giants may trade Daniel Jones if they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks? No, look, John Mara has said at least twice that he would be very surprised if Daniel Jones is not their starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only way I don't think Daniel Jones is the starter, and this is a very long shot, is if his neck injury isn't fully healed. That to me is the wild card. Now, at the Brian Dable presser, he was asked about Daniel and where he is with the neck. And right now, if the season were to start today, Daniel would not be cleared. But they are optimistic that Daniel will be ready to go come August. Now, I know, Chris, there was some confusion. I think we cleared this up on your show when I was on your show about the comments that they were made about, Daniel's not going to have any contact or be allowed to be cleared until August. Mm-hmm. And what Daniel was referring to, for those who are still confused about that, he was just saying that, look, we don't have to worry about contact, playing in the preseason games, which involve contact, until August. So in other words, we have plenty of time before he gets to that stage and a decision has to be made. So in the meantime, Daniel can lift, he can run, he can throw, he can do all the things he needs to do to get ready. He just needs that final clearance that, okay, you can take a hit, and dagnammit, he better learn how to slide feet first if he's going to run. I mean, seriously, get with a baseball coach. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. That's got to be the first thing they teach him with this new coaching staff. But I'm with you. I mean, had the season played out differently, I would have said that that's a possibility in terms of trading Jones. Like, say he never got hurt, I would have said maybe it's a possibility. Like, if they could get a package similar to the Jets got for Sam Darnold, where they got like a second, a fourth, and a sixth round pick. If a team presented him with an offer like that, I would say it's possible, especially if they feel like Jones is not going to be the long-term answer here. But the fact that I don't think you're getting anywhere near that, like you said, mainly due to the fact that with the neck, it's kind of it's questionable, and he hasn't had a ton of success either in terms of the win-loss department. And statistically speaking, over the last 2 years, whether it's mainly his fault or not, I just don't see there being much of a market for Jones where it would be much of an incentive to trade him. The way I look at it is you keep him. I think they're going to view him as a guy that's either going to be a guy that improves and he becomes a guy that could be more of a long-term answer, or he's going to be that stopgap to the inevitable guy that replaces him if he does not, show a dramatic improvement this year. But I know fans want to talk about the next hotshot college, prospect quarterback that we could be bringing in, and that's going to happen during every draft until such time you make a change at the quarterback, unless we get a guy that we know is like a defined long-term answer. But I don't see it happening. Like, for all the reasons that you've said. I mean, there's been quotes that have come out that have said that Dable was absolutely in love with Daniel Jones. Mara has come out now twice and said that he expects Daniel Jones to be the starter next year. If you're drafting a quarterback top 5, top 7, Dan Jones is not going to be the starter. I mean, not if you're taking a quarterback that high. So I just don't think we're drafting a quarterback. I really don't. And maybe they will. Maybe we'll both be wrong. But I think it's going to be Jones. I expect him to be the starter, and I don't think he's getting traded.
Yeah, again, I go back to, see what you've got with Fromm because he came down from Buffalo and get a veteran. Now, do I think that they should have a veteran push Daniel Jones? Absolutely. I'm a little, I got to be honest with you. I was surprised that Mara said, I would be surprised if Daniel's not our starter. You're basically saying, Daniel, you got nothing to worry about. You are our starter. To me, competition never hurt anybody.
Yeah.
And I would not be sitting there, especially given how this team is coming off of a 4-win season, which I understand is not all Daniel's fault. I would not be guaranteeing anybody a starting job next year, other than maybe Andrew Thomas, who I think, earned it, maybe a couple of other guys too, but certainly not, guys who I think were like iffy.
Yeah. I also think the fact that and I agree with you. I think they definitely need at least a strong improvement in terms of a backup to push Daniel Jones for sure. But I also think the fact that Mara came out and literally said, we completely screwed up Daniel Jones leads me to believe that they don't think Jones is the problem. Like if you screwed it up for Daniel Jones, you're saying Daniel Jones didn't screw it up for us. We screwed up for Daniel Jones. So it leads me to believe that Mara does not think Jones is the problem. And everything that's come out from the head coach and the GM, they've talked about wanting to build around Daniel Jones. So maybe they're lying. I don't think so, though. I think he's going to be the guy.
All right. Now, Chris, I've got to flash this question up on the screen because this is specifically for you. We're talking about Daniel Jones and sliding and everything like that.
Okay.
All right. So let me ask you, since we're talking about sliding and you were a baseball player, okay, and this, by the way, I'm assuming is your dad.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Guzzo. How difficult is it to learn how to slide feet first? Is it that big of a deal, do you think? Or what's the
for somebody that's never, I don't know if Daniel Jones has played baseball or not, but for somebody that's never played it, yeah. And I remember when you were in Little League, they'd have the bases that don't move. So you didn't really know how to you didn't have to know how to properly slide. You would basically just slide at the base and the base would move, because if you don't slide properly in baseball, as you get older, the bases don't move. They stay in place. You could injure yourself. So yeah, you have to, if you're a guy who played baseball like I did, through high school, yeah, you have to be able to teach yourself how to properly slide. So yeah, it is a skill. Some people may look at it and be like, oh, how hard is it to slide? It is more of a skill than some people may realize that have never played the sport.
Yeah, I played softball as a teenager, and I got to be honest with you, I don't think I ever slid. I was afraid to slide. I don't know why, but I just never did it. But then again, I didn't have to worry about it because back then my knees were pretty stable and I was able to run. And nine times out of 10, if I had to reach a base, I made it safely. So that's it. All right, let's get another question up here from JC Silva. How do you feel about Aaron Robinson? Oh, this is a good one. He looks tough as nails, high energy. Has he made Holmes obsolete? Now, here, let me ask you this one, Chris. I mean, we know when Robinson was drafted, he was drafted as a slot cornerback. I think that's what he played in UCF. Could he maybe make the transition to outside cornerback if the Giants move on from James Bradbury, or would you keep him in the slot and maybe, I don't know, does Holmes become obsolete or does he become your dime back?
Yeah, well, Holmes played outside in college. It's just that the Giants felt like, and a lot of people felt like, it's why they tried him out in the slot at the Senior Bowl, because they thought he'd be better fit to play slot in the NFL. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how the Giants will feel about Holmes, but I think Robinson, if I'm not mistaken, played almost exclusively slot in college. And I think he was drafted to play that role with the New York Giants. So my guess would be, and again, we don't know due to the fact that the guys that are coming in had nothing to do with either one of those players in terms of bringing those players in. So I guess they're going to analyze these guys and come up with a decision in terms of who they think is best suited where. But if I had to guess, based off the way that Robinson played last year, I thought he was starting to show improvement throughout the year. I think Robinson's going to have the upper hand on Darnay Holmes in terms of the starting slot cornerback. But that's not a guarantee at all, due to the fact that Joe Schoen has nothing to do with either one of them.
Yeah, and everybody's, again, clean slate for everybody. So that's going to be interesting to see, though. But I wonder if maybe the Giants have their answer if they move on from James Bradbury. Again, if we don't know if that's going to be the case. All right, let's get another one up here. This is from the FBI. Do you think we need another receiver? Yeah, I do. I do. As I've mentioned, I don't think Sterling Shepard is going to be back next year, which again is going to kill me because I love Shep.
Yeah.
Um, I especially don't want to see, the fact that he would be potentially ending his Giants career with that injury just breaks my heart. But when they drafted Kadarius Toney, to me, that was the writing on the wall for Shep. Because what you don't want, in my opinion, do you remember when they signed Golden Tate? And I know when they signed him, I said, why are they signing this guy? He's basically a duplicate of Shepard as far as most of his skill set. And they moved Shep outside, which to me never made sense because Shep made his money as a slot receiver. Now you're moving him outside. And I just felt that it was kind of stupid on the Giants' part,
Yeah,
for
I
lack of
agree
a
with
better
you.
term. So, here you have Kadarius Toney, who's primarily a slot guy. I know he can play outside. I know he can do a lot more. But I kind of see the same situation almost where, does it make sense to keep Shepard and Toney on the roster? I don't think it does.
No, I don't think it does either. I don't think it's going to happen. Especially because Shepard got hurt. Had Shepard not gotten hurt, I think he would have been here for one more year. But I don't think he was ever going to be in the long-term plans of the New York Giants once they did what they did this past offseason. I mean, they spent $72 million on Kadarius Toney. And then they went out there and, like you said, they spent on at least he's going to be used partially in the slot with a guy like Kadarius Toney. They spent a first-round pick on him. So I don't think he was ever in the long-term plans. I don't think Slayton's in the long-term plans either. I do think he'll be back next year. But I agree with you. I do think there's a need at the wide receiver position. I just don't think it's a need that we could afford to take in the first round of this year's draft. I think there's more pressing needs for this football team at more important positions.
Yes, build from the inside out, please.
Yeah.
And also, not in addition to offensive line, I wonder if they're not going to address the defensive line too, because Austin Johnson, I believe, is going to be a free agent. Like I said, I don't know that they're going to pick up Dexter Lawrence's fifth-year option. He will be back. I think they need some more talent up there. I mean, and here's a guy. I'm not sure where he fits in. Maybe you have a theory on this, but where does Ellerson Smith fit in? I mean, he's not, to me, he's not bulky enough to be on the defensive line. They tried him a little bit at outside linebacker, and, it's a very small sample size. I just can't get a read on this guy where his best fit is.
When they drafted Ellerson Smith, I kind of looked at him as like a project due to the fact that, like you said, and I know he bulked up somewhat, but I remember watching his college tape and he was like built like a pencil. He hadn't played in a year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think he sat out due to COVID, or maybe there was
his season was canceled because of COVID.
Yeah. So he hadn't played in a year. So I viewed him as a guy that was not going to have much of an impact his rookie year, and that was basically the case. He got a little bit of playing time at the end of the year. I think he had an injury at the beginning, or at least they put him on IR. I mean, right now I'm not going to set my expectations too high for a guy like Ellerson Smith. Maybe he's a guy that you could bring in sub packages, a guy that could be a situational pass rusher, but he's definitely not. At least as of now, a guy that I view as someone that's going to make a dramatic impact at the edge rusher position. The only guy right now that is definitively going to be on this team next year is Ojulari at that position. That I'm like, yeah, he could be a guy that could at least have somewhat of an impact. Lorenzo Carter possibly as well if they bring him back. I don't know if they're going to do that though.
Carter, I would bring back on a 1-year prove-it deal, or I would do a 2-year deal, one of those years being voidable, just to kind of spread it out a little bit. When I say prove-it deal, obviously that would be like a minimum. So maybe I would do like a 2-year deal and have 1 year voidable, or just, set it up so that all the money comes in the first year. I don't know that I would give up on Carter. The last 4 games, he got healthy and he looked like the guy that he started to look like before he had the Achilles injury a couple years ago. I don't know that he's a Batman per se. I keep using the expression Batman Robin. I think the Giants need a Batman. Now, can Ojulari be that Batman? I don't know. Quincy Roche is another guy I like. I just feel like they have a lot of Robins right now at edge rusher, and they don't have that Batman just yet.
I agree with you. There's no Batman on this roster, and I don't want to pay Lorenzo Carter Batman money. Right. If I could pay Lorenzo Carter Robin money, if I could pay Lorenzo Carter Catwoman money, maybe I'll go about doing that. But I'm not giving Larry. He's not a main superhero. That's the way I look at Lorenzo Carter. I'm not giving him that top tier money, but I do think he's a guy that has potential. The problem with him has always been injuries, at least in recent years. He started to show some potential. Joe Judge's first year, the first 3 or 4 games before he got hurt. And I do think it's a legitimate excuse or whatever you want to call it that he did start off slow this year, being that he was coming off of the serious Achilles injury the year he had before. And it could have been, the way as good as he looked over the last 4 or 5 games could have been him getting back into form. And I would love to have Carter back, but it's got to be for Catwoman money. Can't be for Batman money. I don't even think I want to give him Robin money. I want to give him.
Well, he also had that ankle injury. Don't forget, he had an ankle injury mid-season too, which I think kind of slowed things down as well. So, but yeah, I agree with you. I would not pay him Batman money at all. But all right, we got about another 15 or so minutes left. We'll take your questions here. LA Sports wants to know, could we possibly trade Martinez or Bradbury? I don't think they can trade Martinez because he's coming off the injury. Bradbury, though, I wonder. I would inquire. I would, could they trade him? I could see that. I mean, you'd have to find a team that had a lot of cap space and who felt they were one cornerback away, but I wouldn't rule that out. Would you?
No, I wouldn't rule it out. I just don't know how many teams are going to be looking to trade for a 30, 31-year-old cornerback that makes $21 million. But you'd probably be able to get something for him. There's going to be teams out there that need help at that position. I would if I was going to cut him, I would sooner look to trade him. I would try to get some draft compensation. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think his dead cap is still going to go against the New York Giants salary cap. By trading him, it's still the same hit. It's just a matter of getting some draft compensation back if you were able to trade him. But if they do trade him, don't expect to get much more than, say like a 4th or 5th round pick, similar to what we got for Snacks Harris when we traded him.
Right.
Just due to the fact of the amount of money that the guy makes and the salary cap, space that he would eat up on the team that he was going to. So, but yeah, I think there may be a market for him. It just wouldn't be as high as some fans may think.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, when you trade a player, the remaining prorated signing bonus accelerates into the current cap year if you do it before June 1st. So obviously you want to take that into consideration. So if the Giants were to trade James Bradbury before June 1st, they would get hit with all the dead money up front. And look, the Giants are going to have a big amount of dead money. And I talked about that in my salary cap pieces on Giants Country. But I do think the good news is in 2023, that cap will be a lot healthier looking than it is now. You don't want to pile up the dead money. I mean, losing teams pile up the dead money. And the Giants, for a couple of years, were right up there in the top 5 with dead money, and they had the record to show for it. And I remember Pat Shurmur, I think at one point even griping about that, saying, well, we couldn't do anything in free agency. So, yeah, you want to be careful with that and just try to balance that out a little bit. So, all right, some more questions we'll take. Sergio Rodriguez, haven't heard anything about Wilson coming over. Is that officially dead? Sergio, I don't think that ever really had life, to be honest with you. I mean, again, John Mara, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, they've all pledged their support and belief in Daniel Jones. We've talked about the Giants cap situation. I don't think the Giants are going to make a trade for Russell Wilson. I'm sorry. Russell's a great quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see him here. Financially, I don't think they can pull it off.
Yeah, I think that if I'm being honest with you, Pat, I think that's probably that when the Russell Wilson thing to me was always a pipe dream, and it was always just something that was content, something to talk about when there was very little to talk about. And fans like to talk about quarterback rumors and where this guy may end up. And I'm sure that Russell Wilson threw it out there that he played for the Giants due to the fact that it would be good for his off-the-field impact. And his wife has been rumored to want to come to New York for quite some time. But it never made a whole lot of sense to me in terms of the fit with the New York Giants. He's approaching 35 years old. What it would cost to bring him in for a team like the New York Giants, like Shane has said from the start, that is looking to build from the ground up. That's basically what he's told you guys. Maybe not those exact words. I don't see the New York Giants trading away 2-3 first-round picks for a guy that's 35 years old. I think Russell Wilson makes a lot more sense if they were to trade him to go to a team that's further developed, a team that is a quarterback away next year from feeling like they could compete for a Super Bowl. I don't view the Giants as one of those teams.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right. This next one's a comment from T. Gerardo. See what they have with Jake Fromm. Yeah, why not? I mean, he's on the. I think he's going to be an exclusive rights free agent, if I'm not mistaken. He's not going to count against top 51. What is it? What's the harm, man? I mean, come on. Worst case scenario, if you need that roster spot, you can cut him. But for the
Put
time
him on the
being,
practice squad. Why not?
right. But I'm talking for the 90-man roster. If he's not going to count against top 51, which I doubt he will. What's the big deal? I mean, come on. I mean, what do you got to lose? You might be surprised, or you might find out that he's totally worthless. I don't know. I mean, that's my thinking there. So, all right, another question here. Let's go with this is Satvik, who asked, "Would you sign a veteran offensive lineman along with drafting a few?" I would, yes. Mm-hmm. And my feeling from the offensive line regarding the offensive line, I felt that last year and it wasn't, granted it was circumstances. Nobody counted on injury. Nobody counted on, guys retiring. But that said, the Giants were going with all youth, which I get what they were trying to do, but their backup plan as far as, having young guys in the pipeline, that's where I think they fell short amongst other places with the offensive line. So I would absolutely consider signing a veteran. I wouldn't spend a lot on a veteran. I would maybe go like in the second, pick somebody out of the second tier, maybe second or third tier of free agency. Mm-hmm. And I would use that draft to get at least two guys. And then maybe I would get an undrafted free agent offensive lineman because they need talent in that pipeline, which they do not fully have.
Yeah, I don't think they have a choice but to do both. Right now, we have one guy that we know for sure is going to be a starting offensive lineman next year for the New York Giants. We could say that Lemieux maybe could be. We could say that, Gates maybe could be. But the only guy we know for sure is Andrew Thomas. So I think they need to do both. They're probably going to lose Will Hernandez to free agency. I think they're going to sign a guard. But I don't think it's like you said. We don't have a lot of money. So I think it's going to be like a short-term solution. I brought it up today on Twitter. I think Ryan Bates, I don't know if you or anybody in the chat knows much about him. I did a little bit of research just because I figured we're bringing over all their coaches anyway. You would only think that some of the potential pending free agents for the Bills, the New York Giants would look to bring in. Bates is a guy that the Bills traded for in, I think it was 2019 with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a former undrafted free agent offensive lineman. He's got experience playing both the guard and the center, so he's all over the interior. He had like a 66th grade last year. But I would look for it to be somebody like that, like similar to a guy like Mike Remmers, but on the interior. A guy that's going to be a 1 or 2 year stopgap that could fill a hole until you get more of a long-term answer. I don't see them finding a long-term answer in free agency, but I do think they'll look to fill a hole through it.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Satvik keeps coming up with the great questions here. Nobody's talking about Rodarius Williams. Does he have a place on the Giants? I think he does. I definitely think he does. Played well, all things considering. Last year, of course, had the injury, unfortunately, but I'd bring him back and I'd let him compete.
Yeah, I see no reason not to bring him back. And depending on what you do in the draft, I suppose maybe he doesn't make the roster if you draft a couple of cornerbacks, but I see no reason not to bring him back and see if he can compete to at least provide some depth on the outside. I wouldn't bank on him being a starter, but no reason not to bring him back.
Yeah, definitely. They have some guys. Jaron Williams is another guy who, I think will be back. Again, remember, folks, you've got the top 51. So the cap rules change a little bit. You can carry these guys and not have them hit your cap. And, you're going to need 90 for training camp anyhow. So why not? Why not bring them back? What's the worst that happened? Maybe somebody steps up and you find somebody that, you didn't know you had. I mean,
yeah, I think I expect players like that to be back. They're not going to cut everybody.
No, they can't. I mean, it's tempting to cut everybody, but no, they're not. They're definitely not going to do that. All right. So, Chris, we have a few minutes left. What would you like to see this Giants team do, whether it be a coaching hire or obviously we won't see any personnel moves or serious personnel moves for a while yet, but what do you think has to be the next big priority for this team in the next few weeks, whether again, coaching hire or what they need to do?
Well, they pretty much already have the main pieces of the coaching staff filled out, it seems, right? With the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, I mean, I think the next couple of weeks, what they're going to do is they're going to sit down and they're going to talk about their strategy. The first thing you got to focus on is obviously you still got to focus on the draft. You got to kind of do it at the same time, but come up with an offseason plan. Talk about the players that you want to bring back. Talk about the players that you want to cut. I think the first thing that Shane's is going to focus strongly on, kind of like he hinted at, is getting this salary cap situation figured out. Getting that $40 million off the roster and finding out how they're going to replace some of the players they're going to have to move on from in free agency and both the draft. In terms of needs, I mean, we've said it several times this offseason to me, it's got to be focused heavily on the offensive line and definitely on the defensive line as well. I think they need help on both sides of the trenches, but I think you have to focus strongly on that offensive line, and you got to start coming up with a plan in terms of, between the offensive coordinator and now Dable, with Kafka and Dable, to figure out what type of offense you want to mold around Daniel Jones and what players could get the most out of him.
Absolutely. And, for those who missed it, it looks like Kevin Abrams is staying on to help Joe Shane with the salary cap. Now, a lot of people, and this is another misconception, a lot of people blame Kevin Abrams for the mess that the Giants are in. Kevin Abrams basically, did he have a hand in it? Yes, but not as big a hand as you think it is. Basically, it was a matter of, the GM coming and saying, hey, we want to sign this guy for this amount, figure out how to make it fit. And if your boss says, okay, figure out how to make something fit, and you don't have the budget, you're going to kind of pull every trick out of your hat that you can.
Yeah.
So
I can't blame him for that.
I don't blame him either. I think, look, Kevin Abrams, for those who don't know, he came from the NFL Management Council over 20 years ago. That's when they were starting to put the salary cap in. And that's why Ernie Accorsi hired him. Ernie told me this for my book. He hired him because he came right from the NFL Management Council. So he was in on the ground floor when they put the salary cap in. Now, the cap rules have changed, obviously, but Abrams has stayed on top of it. For the most part, he's done a pretty good job, I think, with managing the cap. I know it's out of control right now, but I put that more on the strategy, the overall strategy that the Giants tried to pull off last year. A strategy which, by the way, I was sitting there going, this is not going to end well.
It was a gamble.
It was a huge gamble, and they didn't take into consideration, that there would be injuries, which, you don't like to think about it, but you have to plan for all this stuff. And there was no plan B. And I think that's why they got into the trouble that they got into. But again, I do believe that they will, after this year, that cap will look a lot better than it does. And also remember, folks, the new TV revenue money is going to kick in next year. This year, they're kind of still coming out of the COVID problem, the effect of the COVID pandemic. So we're going to see an increase in the salary cap starting next year, and then therefore, going onward, because the new TV revenue is going to come. So brighter skies are definitely ahead for the salary cap. I've already looked at that. When I do salary cap work, I project into the next 2-3 years, because you got to do that.
Yeah. I think next year the salary cap is fine for the Giants. For everybody that's flipping out, this year it's not, but you knew that last season. I mean, last year the New York Giants had no choice. Plus, you factor in, like you were kind of saying, the pandemic last year, it actually shrunk the cap, and the Giants went out there and they brought in the guys that they did. That's not Abrams' fault. I mean, maybe Abrams had something to do with the decision making. He was the assistant GM, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with both Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman. I think they were the main decision makers last year in terms of who they were going to bring in, and it's his job after you do that to find a way to fit it under the budget. I have no problem with Abrams in terms of just being a capologist. Where my issue was when we started to hear about Abrams in the offseason was when they were potentially talking about promoting him to being the GM. That's where I would have had an issue. But in his current role, I don't really see him having much of an impact in terms of the personnel decisions that the New York Giants make. As a matter of fact, I think something came out that he even offered to potentially take a step down from being the assistant GM and basically just stay in his capologist role if Joe Shane felt more comfortable doing something along those lines.
Yeah, John Mara actually said that at the Brian Dable's presser, which, look, I mean, Kevin Abrams, I know a lot of people give him flack. Really, he's a good guy. I mean, I've met him a couple of times, a very humble guy, willing, a total team player, willing to do what's best for the organization. I think, give him a chance to work with Shane. Shane's background is not in salary cap. I think that was kind of clear, I think, in talking with him and also listening to him. But they'll get it straightened out. I'm really confident. And once they do, folks, it's going to be really exciting to see what moves they make. Team needs a lot of work. I'm not sitting here saying that, they can go from worst to first, like I know the 49ers did a few years ago, or even the Bengals. Even the Bengals had a couple of years where they had to kind of rebuild. But I kind of see this almost like when George Young was brought in here. And Chris, I don't know how old you are, if you remember George Young. I do, unfortunately, because I'm that old. But when George Young came in '79, folks, the Giants were a mess. They were coming off the fumble. They were coming off 15 lousy years of football, the wilderness years. George didn't finally get that team back on track until, I want to say, 1981 is when they finally started to get on track. That's when they first made the playoffs. So the question is can we all be patient, knowing that it's going to probably take a year or two for Joe Shane and Brian Dable to straighten out what is basically a roster that just wasn't solid. I mean, it has some pieces, but needs a lot of work.
Yeah. I look at this offseason much like I looked at the 2019 offseason. The 2019 offseason was a offseason I knew that they were going to start a rebuild, and that's what happened. We could go back in time like we always do and say they should have done an 18. They didn't do it. 2019 was an offseason I knew that they were kind of limited in terms of their ability to spend in free agency. It was going to be a lot of short-term deals, guys like Antoine Bethea, guys like several other players that they brought in, Marcus Golden, right? That were like 1-year deals. I look at this offseason the same way. Don't expect the New York Giants to go out there and bring in the sexiest of names. It's not going to happen. New York Giants are going to look to try to plug some holes for this year with their roster and free agency and flip those guys over the next year. And maybe the next year is where you'll start to see them get a little bit aggressive in free agency to fill in some, multi-year answers at certain positions. But this year, I think the majority of the guys they are going to bring in are going to be 1-year stopgaps. And I think we'll struggle this year, if I'm being honest. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they win 17 games. But I think it's a process. And I think as a fan base, we need to realize that. And it's going to take a little bit of time. And we have to hope that these guys make the right decisions.
Absolutely. And just got to be patient. I mean, I think they'll be better than what they were last year. I mean, nowhere to go but up, really. But, just got to be patient. And I know that's easier said than done, because we've all sat through the last decade, and it's been hard for all of us. I don't like it anymore. I know there's this big theory that the media likes covering losing football. I don't. I can't speak for anybody else. I don't like it. But I'm optimistic. I always am, until proven otherwise. So anyway, folks, this was great. Chris, always a pleasure. This was fantastic. Again, apologies earlier for cutting off the first few minutes of the broadcast. I hope it recorded. If it did, I'll re-upload everything. I hope it's on there. If not, you didn't miss all that much. Folks, if I did not answer your questions, please feel free to send them to me. The email address is lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. We have a Twitter Tuesday planned for next week, so I will get those questions in if I did not see them or miss them on this show. And Chris, I know you keep doing your thing. You not just Giants, you do Knicks. I guess you do Yankees too, right?
Mets. I'm a Mets fan.
Mets. Okay.
Yeah,
I knew I liked you for a reason. I'm a Mets fan too. A Mets sufferer.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that a while ago. But yeah, mainly like 95% Giants. But I just appreciate you having me on anytime. There's something to talk about. Always more than welcome to come on my channel as well. And I'm excited to see. I mean, we're gonna find out. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking about it today, Pat. I was like, wow, like free agency is like 5 weeks away or 6 weeks away, and the draft's like 10 weeks away. Like it's gonna be here before you know it. This is gonna come up real fast. And I think I think maybe why it stuck up with me a little quicker this year is because there was an extra week to the regular season, perhaps. I don't know, but it just felt like it got here quicker this year. So I'm excited to watch the Senior Bowl tomorrow. And, maybe we'll see some guys that stand out. And I'm sure some fans will be excited about that. And draft's going to be here before you know it. But I appreciate you having me on. And, let's go Giants.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. And Roldy, I saw your comment. I think I missed your questions, and I apologize because these comments come at me really quickly, so I'm trying to keep up with them while also trying to pay attention to the screen. So, Roldy, send your questions in to me on email. The address is going to be in the show notes. Again, it's lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. I'll be happy to answer those questions, as well as anybody else who I might have missed. Send those questions in to me. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back Monday with an all-new show, and I'll have to check and see what my subscriber count is. Who knows? Maybe we'll be opening up the box to find out what's in it if I hit 2,000 subscribers.
You
So
gained some. I just looked. You're not there yet, though.
I'm not there yet.
Not
Okay.
there yet, but you gained some.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe at some point next week. We'll see if it rock and rolls well. All right, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend. Chris, thank you for joining me as always, folks. Thank you for coming in, and we will catch you next week.